Promoting national unity or risking further instability. Ethiopia is facing major backlash against a decision to dissolve regional forces across 11 states. The move to merge them into the national army triggered violent protests in Amhara province. Have regional forces been betrayed, or is this a necessary step toward ending ethnic division in the country? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is dismantling Ethiopia's regional forces. Well, despite huge protests, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has pushed ahead with plans to dissolve the country's regional military forces and integrate them into the federal army or police. He says it's part of an effort to unify the country's defense forces, but when he announced the plan, it sparked gun battles and mass demonstrations in Ethiopia's second biggest city, Amhara. Regional forces say it's a betrayal after they fought alongside Ethiopia's national army during the conflict in Tigray. Now, 2 aid workers with the Catholic Relief Services were killed and several other people were shot during the chaos. Protesters say the government's plans would leave them exposed to attacks from other regions, especially from Tigray. Each region has long enjoyed a degree of autonomy, including maintaining their own special police forces and operating in their local languages. But some have also established their own militia. As such, the Amhara forces played a key role in the 2-year war against Tigrayan rebels that ended with a ceasefire 5 months ago. Abiy has said the policy will strengthen multi-ethnic unity.
The state strengthened their police force by preventing crime and maintaining local peace. They only focus on a force that threatens the country's borders, existence, and sovereignty. And when it rises, the defense forces will take action. Arrangements for this have also been implemented.
So is the government taking the tough steps needed to end Ethiopia's ethnic division, or is Abiy Ahmed stoking it by making unilateral decisions? Joining me now to debate that are, from Addis Ababa, Ledet Muleta, the communications director of Ethiopia Shall Continue. It's a US-based civil society organization founded by Ethiopian Americans. From Washington, Omer Redi, a senior journalist and political commentator on Ethiopia and African affairs. He's also managing director and editor-in-chief at Africa Media and Communications. And also from the U.S. Capitol is Meaza Gebremedhin, an international relations specialist at Omna Tigray, which focuses on educated advocacy and economic development for Tigrayans. Now, an Amharan MP was also supposed to join us and unfortunately had to cancel at the very last minute. So I will try to get somewhat of the Amharan perspective from you, Omer, because the Amhara people, some at least, argue that because Tigrayan rebels have not been disarmed, that without their own protection forces, they will be attacked if Amharan forces are dismantled. Is there some truth to that?
Thank you. I would like to make it clear that I'm not representing any particular ethnic group here. I'm not speaking for anyone, but like you said, I can explain what the concerns of the Amhara in particular are in this case, because that's
right.
The hurt.
That's what we're asking, yeah.
Have been essentially victimized over the past nearly 30 years by several ethnically oriented attacks here and there. And in recent years, in the past 2 years, they have suffered a lot under the TPLF forces' occupation of the large parts of northern Amhara, particularly Gondar and Wollo areas, as much as the Afar have also suffered. So in my view, the Amhara have a legitimate concern of fearing not only TPLF, but also OLF as well. And their mistrust is legitimate in my view.
So they have a right to feel vulnerable at this point. From a journalist perspective, I know it's very hard to get into many of the areas that would reveal completely what is happening. But from what you've seen and heard, Has the TPLF been disarmed as per the peace accord that was, signed off 5 months ago? It's understandable that you say the Amhara would feel vulnerable, but if the TPLF have been disarmed according to the agreement, maybe they should at least try what the Prime Minister is proposing.
A good question. Following the Pretoria Peace Agreement, one of the major undertakings expected was the disarmament of TPLF forces, especially their heavy weaponry. We have seen under the African Union representatives' presence that the TPLF leadership handed over some tanks and some heavy weaponry, but their forces, their fighters, to the most part, are still stationed in some camps inside Tigray. And there are allegations and reports of trainings going on in Tigray. And the disarmament of TPLF, in my view, to a larger extent, lacks transparency on both sides, the federal government sides and on TPLF side. So it's unclear how much of the weaponry TPLF commands has been handed over to the federal army. So the lack of transparency, to a certain extent, the failure of appropriate communications of what has happened so far on the part of the federal government is part of the reason why these uncertainty and the feeling of vulnerability among the Amhara is widespread.
Okay. Meaza, if I'm not mistaken, you look a bit skeptical listening to what Omer's analysis was. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's very interesting that Omer, as an independent journalist, would completely ignore what the Amhara forces have done in Tigray the past 2+ years, where clearly, according to reports from the State Department and other international human rights groups, that the Amhara militia forces and the special forces have committed crimes against humanity, war crimes, and potentially genocidal acts upon the people of Tigray. So let's be clear that we're not talking about an actor that has completely done nothing to the people of Tigray. So having said that, I'm very much skeptical that Mr. Omer is a bit hesitant to admit that the international monitoring body, which comprises members from both sides, from the federal government in Ethiopia and Tigray, as well as from IGAD, was in presence of the Tigray forces handing over their heavy weaponry incomplete. And this has been verified and accepted by the international monitoring body that has been set according to the Pretoria Agreement. And let's also remember that this was supposed to happen concurrently with all complete withdrawal of all foreign forces from Tigray. But we're having this conversation at the backdrop of Amhara occupying parts of Tigray illegally and continuing to commit war crimes against the people. Just last week, the OCHA has shared a report where over 47,000 of Tigrayans have recently been displaced from their homes in Western Tigray and are currently now around Shire in a very deplorable conditions. So the people of Tigray still continue to suffer at the hands of Eritrea and Amhara forces.
Right.
And there is no legitimate threat coming from Tigray.
Let me get to Ledet, because it's so interesting to hear one of our panelists attest to the fact that the Amhara have a right, justifiably, to feel extremely vulnerable at this point, and then to hear Meaza say that the Tigrayans should feel very vulnerable as well. Because, Ledet, you have said a huge obstacle here is that too many people want justice and not peace. And you almost get the feeling that perhaps the Prime Minister is almost trying to, in a sense, force some level of trust on all parties involved to bring about some sense of unity and say that we can all work together if we get past, these feelings of mistrust and vulnerability, as was being described. Do you think any of this is feasible?
Thank you, Andrea. I believe so. I think it's going to take some time because it's a process. I think Ethiopia in general is, in a much better situation today than she was a year ago. There is concerns from all sides. I understand that there is concerns, of Amhara people fearing that they could be attacked again, and on the other hand, the people of Tigray feeling that they could be in another situation where they can be attacked as well. I think the concern is for everyone, but at the same time, steps need to be taken to build a trust and look forward to peace. At this point, I believe that the creating this atmosphere of peace requires some sort of trust, and it takes time. It takes time, but I believe that according to the agreement in South Africa, steps are being taken, and steps that are being taken from the TPLF side is, we're getting updates from the leadership there about their desire for peace and not wanting to revert back to conflicts. So I believe that the people should accept that and move accordingly.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, Omer, this really is about ending what feels like an endless cycle of war in Ethiopia, and that maybe the government is at the point now of having to force a sense of unification. And this is a step toward forcing the integration of these regional forces to give Ethiopians a sense of one nationality. Do you think it can work? Is there any other way?
I don't see any particular reason why this has become a major threat right now. The major threat for Ethiopia's sovereignty and integrity was the 2 years war that the TPLF instigated and that continued for the last 2 years. And the TPLF was the only one that commanded heavy weaponry that attacked the federal army. No other region has done such operation in such a magnitude. So once the federal has dealt with the TPLF forces and ended up signing the peace agreement, it could have taken step-by-step approach and easing the mistrust from the Amhara in particular towards the federal government as well. Not only just the TPLF or OLF, towards the federal government as well. They could have done some sort of campaign and public awareness and education longer. The federal government claims that they have taken these steps, but I would suggest they should have taken a longer step. And I don't see why the federal government is another type of violence, why it could have taken another approach, a softer approach. But
let me ask Meaza about that. I'm just curious to see if you agree as to whether or not this is actually being just rushed unnecessarily. I mean, some might argue after this many years now of war, people dying of starvation, the horrific war crimes or accusations at least of war crimes that we saw emerge, it can't come fast enough.
Exactly. I mean, specifically for the people of Tigray, myself included, people that have lost so much. Over 1 million people have perished in Tigray due to the genocidal war, due to a man-made famine, a weaponized rape and massacre all across the region. For us, peace couldn't come any faster. And the people of Tigray and our leadership continue to be committed to peace and have taken confidence-building measures, including handing over weaponry, heavy weaponry. And this has been done at times to the disadvantage of the people of Tigray, because this was supposed to be done concurrently, like I said, with the complete withdrawal of all foreign forces, including Amhara forces from all parts of Tigray. But as we speak, Amhara forces continue to illegally annex parts of Tigray, western Tigray, southern parts of Tigray, are still under illegal occupation of the Amhara forces. And what the people of Tigray are saying in all of this is that we want peace. We're done with suffering, dying, being massacred simply because of our ethnicity. So peace couldn't have come any farther for us, and we don't think there are any rushed things. But I wanted to touch upon briefly on what you said earlier when you were asking Ledet, that a lot of people are looking for justice. yes, we're looking for justice, because you cannot bring lasting peace without accountability and justice for all the war crimes that have been committed against innocent people. So whatever is done, either from the federal government or from the international community, it needs to be done with a victim-centered approach. And what the victims of
Meaza, quickly, would you settle in that sense? You know, when you say justice, would you settle for a measure of, truth and reconciliation along the lines of, post-apartheid South Africa? Because if everybody is looking for justice, there's going to be, I feel, endless prosecutions on all sides, and the process may never even finish. So would it not be better to look at truth and reconciliation, perhaps?
So Ethiopia has historically gone through endless violence, and all the time there has been truth and reconciliation, but the victims have never got their chance of getting justice and accountability. So this time around, as a Tigrayan, I will not settle for an Ethiopia-owned, transitional justice, because I don't believe the Ethiopian justice mechanism is capable and independent of rendering justice for the victims, which is why we continue to advocate for an international mechanism.
And then the TPLF will also be prosecuted too in that case.
We don't have any problem holding perpetrators of crimes accountable, even if they're Tigrayans.
Okay. Ledet, let me come back to you. Talking again about what's the measures now taken by the Prime Minister to integrate these regional forces into the national security. Where does the move actually stand on legal grounds right now? I'm sure all three of you may have a different opinion on this, but what is your opinion, Ledet? I mean, so many people are saying this is completely unconstitutional, while others are saying, no, it's not, because this is about disarming militias, when the Constitution really only allotted for independent police forces or autonomous police forces, not actual military branches of their own. So there's kind of a gray area there. But where do you stand? Should it be redebated in Parliament, perhaps go to a higher court for judgment, or do you think this is completely fair to make this call?
Thanks, Andrea. I think this is completely fair. First of all, the regional special forces are unconstitutional according to the Ethiopian constitution. According to Article 52, regions are allowed to have police forces, but are not to have militias or regional special forces. In the past, Ethiopia has used regional special forces for one thing or another, usually inter-communal, violence. But one of the reasons that it's unconstitutional is also because they can also instigate conflicts among ethnic groups or regions. So it is absolutely the perfect time. The Prime Minister has been busy dealing with previous issues of conflict and peace process, and now it's the time. And they actually have had a meeting, the entire administration, regional administrations. This is something that was not just announced without the agreement of each region. They have sat down, discussed this issue, and agreed that this was the time. And so part of the reason that there's a lot of talks about it is because there's, opposition parties or people who are looking to misinform people about this issue. This is something that everyone in the administration that this particular issue related to have voted and agreed on dismantling the regional special forces.
Okay.
So is it timely? Yes, it's timely because we are relatively at a peaceful position to where we should handle this now. And then also these forces could potentially be used for another, for another possible conflict between regions. So it's perfectly the perfect time to dismantle.
Fair enough. Let me ask Omer, is this constitutional? Has it been fairly debated, or was it too much of a unilateral decision on behalf of the government and the ruling power there, as Amharas are complaining?
Thank you. I would raise a couple of things to to explain that. One, when it comes to constitutionality, it has a legit ground that the federal government is trying to dismantle to integrate these regional forces into the federal army. Because according to the constitution, I don't remember the specific articles, but it's only the federal government that can have an army and foreign relations and currency related or finance related institutions. As far as I know, the only region that violated these has been Tigray, with the establishment of what they called the TDF, which is an army on its own. And the current regional president, Gidey was in his Twitter account, it was there until it was assigned, that he was a foreign relations something to the regional administration. So no other region has a foreign relation, no other region has a foreign army, an actual army. Once there is peace deal with that, that takes me to the second issue. It is a bit hasty. So it could have taken time. Whether it is debated or not, I'm not sure, because the party, what it has inherited from its predecessor, EPRDF, is a culture of secrecy and lack of trust. And we don't know whether they have debated this enough or not. What we know is they have made this decision and they have announced it and they are taking action.
Okay.
And there are consequences to that. So,
okay.
But I should say one last point here is there is nothing wrong about integrating the regional forces, because it is truly a recipe for disaster and conflict to have such regional special forces go on. But there are issues to be addressed mainly along the ethnically organized regional administration.
Right. Let me ask, I don't think Meaza agrees. Let me ask what you think you can do now then procedurally from a legal perspective if Tigrayans especially are unhappy with this integration.
What Tigrayans are unhappy is with this continual ignorance of what has happened to the people of Tigray. We're talking about survivors of a genocide. Although the Ethiopian government would not admit to the genocide that it instigated and have rallied all forces.
I understand that, but I'm just asking you procedurally what you think you can do now about this aspect of what the government has decided, this forced integration of a regional force that you think the Tigrayan people need to basically ensure their survival and stop the genocide, as you call it.
Well, I'm not privy to what the federal government might have decided, but what I can speak to is that the need that to listen to the people, even the innocent Amhara people in Amhara. So I believe they deserve justice. I believe their rights should be respected to having a peaceful life. And in order to make that happen, I think there needs to be a dialogue between all stakeholders and then bring discussions into a table and see if there is a peaceful resolution to whatever is happening. But what I want to speak today here is that the need for all Amhara forces to withdraw from all parts of Tigray, because there is a scramble for Tigrayan lands. What has brought all the federal government and the Amhara forces previously the past 2 years to commit an outright state-sponsored genocide against the people of Tigray, which is why the people of Tigray have been forced into picking arms and fighting for their rights. Tigray didn't have a militarized army before the beginning of the genocide, but after the beginning of the genocide, my family members and every Tigrayan has been forced to pick arms and to defend its rights of their people. So let's just be clear that Tigray didn't have an army, but we were forced into defending our rights, our land, and our people. Unfortunately, our people still continue to suffer.
Right. Meaza, we only have a minute and a half left, and I really want to give you some final words to give everybody equal time. Meaza, go ahead. Sorry.
My final point
sorry. My apologies. Ledet, do go ahead.
Yes, Andrea, I think it's high time for Ethiopia to recognize its faults for the conflict, the war, for every region involved. And I think It's very important that in order to move forward, that we need to have one national force, and that national force is going to be responding for the entire country. That will ensure justice and peace, in my opinion. So I think this reform needs to be supported. I think from this past conflict, what we also have learned is that whenever you have any region who is fighting to take over unconstitutionally the seat or the palace, take over the palace, as we see right now in Sudan, this is the type of conflict that we will have. So I am glad that the government of Ethiopia is taking the steps that it's taking now, and I think we should all rally against, behind them for this cause, instead of looking for excuses and looking at the past, not to progress to the future. That's my message is for us to.
And that will, that will have to be the final word, Ledet, because unfortunately we're out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. But I'm very sure I'll be seeing you all on further episodes in the near future as this decision is unfolding on the ground in Ethiopia, and what the response will actually be when the time comes to actually merge these regional forces into the national army. But thank you all so much for being with us on this edition of the Newsmakers, and thanks, of course, to our viewers for tuning in as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.